Book 2. Planetary Lullabye, Book 2, The Arch Ubhermesh. To someone who doesn't know the lore, that title just looks like a whole conglomeration of letters. Okay, so let's talk about it, shall we? So, if you'll remember, at the end of last book, Chemmel got mixed together with like 10 mirror parts of Lyric and became like this massive abomination. Lamech died. He ceased to exist because he tried to strike Lyric directly. And then Lyric, Chemmel, Gravathon, and like a whole bunch of other like Bereshi, evil Bereshi, Ubhermesh, a whole bunch of them traveled to the void of Thela. Thela was like the big lion who had the Emerald Eye of Soul of Moon, referred to as the Orb of Prophecy. And they basically tried to fight the big lion. They didn't... They couldn't land a single blow on the big lion. But Lyric did manage to escape with the Emerald Eye of Soul of Moon. As for the other guys, the army, Thela made sure that when they went back through the portal, they did not end up back in Odotham. Thela made sure that when they went through the portal, the army would sort of be scattered about. So everyone who went back through the portal ended up in like a different location. We start out the story with like a very silly story, where it's like Gravathon ends up on like this farmer world. Gravathon ends up in like this farmer's world, and like her sword had been lodged in the ground, and it's implied that she'd been unconscious for like many years, because multiple generations of Sapien are now living inside of her sword, and they're like treating it like a they're treating it like a home. So Gravathon goes over and just picks up her house, and the Sapiens don't just let her take the house. They do actually sort of like follow her and like try to ride a combine harvester up her flesh. It's a rather silly scene. And the way it ends is that Gravathon eventually forms a mirror gate to just sort of like get out of there. But as she's being like chased by like the Sapien police of the world, which don't really bother her that much at all, she just like looks up to the sky, sees the star, points her sword at it, and this is sort of where we get the first instance of Gravathon using her sword's powers. Gravathon's sword is able to move massive quantities of plasma, and these massive quantities of plasma are stars. So she can just like move the stars with her sword. And now, interestingly enough, I didn't go into detail about like the way that the sword was built, but like if I go here to a lot of the stuff in here is actually like memes and stuff. A lot of these visuals in here are memes, and like this is the stone that Gravathon put in her sword, and this allows her to like sort of just move stars. It's a very powerful thing that she has. Also, I might as well show you guys this. I didn't explain it too much last time, but after Chemmel surrounded Odotham with like black plasma, he moved it. And this is kind of why no one knows where Odotham is because Chemmel just keeps moving it. So that's kind of why. So that's just kind of like a silly story to start things out. What's this guy? I don't think this guy... Oh, no, yeah, he did. Hang on. Yeah, he did. was like, oh, that guy didn't appear in Planetary Lullabye. No, he did. He did. Okay. So after that, the Ubhermesh army is kind of summoned to a battle which is currently being led by Magog, actually. Magog exerts some control and gets control over the abomination, and Magog just, like, starts a fight with some other, like... Magog just kind of starts a fight with, like, this solar system of, Because like, there was a big fight, like, against the solar system in, like, the first book of Planetary Lullabye. Magog's, hey, let's just do that again, because that was kind of fun. However, Magog is kind of like a really bad tactician. So, what happens is that Larrick, right? Larrick managed to get a hold of the Orb of Prophecy. And he went through a mirror gate to sort of escape Thela. Larrick focused his will and put the mirror gate on the moon at the end of Chemel's chain, so that, like, he could just, like, get to where Chemel was, right? That was sort of his logic. Now, as Magog was, like, trying to, like, strike at the system, everyone was noticing that he was such a bad tactician at this that, like, as Lamech was, like, about to like, strike a whole bunch of asteroids, Larrick actually, like, flies to, like, the point between the asteroid and Magog's weapon. And since Magog tried to strike Larrick directly, Magog ceases to exist at that point. So now both Lamech and Magog have ceased to exist. So Larrick takes charge, but also Chemel is kind of in charge. This is like a big theme of Book 2, is sort of the strained leadership between, like, Chemel and Larrick. Like, they're still not... Like, it's still not fully established that Larrick is the leader, even though no one can hurt him. Chemel's still got, like, this bigger presence and louder personality that the Ubhermesh just kind of, like, respect, right? And so, like, this battle continues, and eventually, Chemel gets to, like, this really big planet that's in front of the star. The closest planet to the star is, like, a really big planet. Chemel lands on top of it, and he goes to, like, sort of the deepest recesses of the planet. Now, interestingly enough, the sapiens of the Ubhermesh actually do have a lot of significance to the Ubhermesh army, because it is easier for a sapien to break bedrock than it is for a Bereshi to break bedrock. And so, like, sapien miners can sort of, like, break through to the mantle of a world. And, like, the mantle of this planet that's, like, closest to the star, it's sort of like this green plasma. And so, like, one of the things that the Ubhermesh did before this battle was they actually sent, like, a whole bunch of sapiens down there to sort of, like, mine into the mantle. And now, what Chemel does, I believe it is actually referred to as a red matter explosive, for those of you who like the Ogscast. Chemel puts a red matter explosive inside of the mantle of this world. He just puts, like, a red matter explosive, he sets it in the magma. This will go off in a few minutes, and it'll, like, sort of, like, explode this planet. So, whilst they're in the middle of, like, fighting, the main guys, like, Chemel, Larrick, and Gravithon, they all go up to, like, the surface of the planet. And Gravathon sees the star. Gravathon sees the star of the system they're currently on. Gravathon points her sword at the star of the system, and she just throws it away. Now that was not a good idea, because now the system is like pitch black, but it's not pitch black because there's actually two like really big lights in the sky, and these two really big lights are not stars. These are the eyes of the Archbreshi of this system. Now, interestingly enough, this system is referred to as Uzmik. The star is referred to as Uzmik, and the Archbreshi is referred to as Agribel. Now, you might remember that Agribel was the planetary guardian of a planet called Uzmik. This is a different Agribel. This is one of his mirror parts. Remember, the 12-sided mirror is kind of like the multiverse if there's only 12 of them. This mirror part of Agribel is an Archbreshi, a guardian of a star. So, I like to call him Arch Agribel. Is kind of what I like to call this guy. So, I believe I did have a visual for this at one point, but I checked earlier and I don't think I uploaded it at all. So, what Arch Agribel does is he forms like a mirror gate to his side. This mirror gate leads to a place called Taburu, which is kind of like hell in the 12-sided mirror. It's sort of like, you know, Chemel has his obsidian moon, which he tried to keep trophies in for all eternity. Essentially what Taburu is it's like the core of a planetoid. However, it's the core of a planetoid. But it's like inescapable, right? It's sort of the... Because, like, there's void mantles, right? This is, like, the void mantle in, like, the middle of a massive planetoid. I discussed void mantles in, like, the first episode. And this is sort of where they keep Ubhermesh trapped. So they won't, like... This is where they keep the Ubhermesh trapped so they won't, like... mess up the 12-sided mirror, which they so love to do. So Arch Agribel reaches his hand towards the planet, which Chemel and like the others are on, and he starts grabbing like massive handfuls of like sand and dirt and stuff, and he starts like dropping them into the mirror gate which leads to Taburu. And he just keeps doing this. And, like, Chemel's running like crazy. Lyric and Gravathon are riding on his back because Chemel's like this big dragon now. As they're running, first they're running, like, over the surface of the planet. Then they get inside to the core and they start, like, running around in the core of the planet because they think that they'll be safe from Arch Agribel there. No, because Arch Agribel's fingers can reach down to, like, that big bedrock mine where everyone was. And they're sort of, like, running around in this space. And Lyric wants Chemel to grow really big so he can stand against Arch Agribel like he did to, like, Charalib in the previous book. However, there are will caps in the 12-sided mirror. Basically like a cap on the amount of will that you're allowed to exert. Chemel, being currently mashed together with Lyric's other mirror parts, is subject to the will caps of his other mirror parts. To an extent. It's sort of like a balance out between like Chemel's will cap and like Sajdu's will cap, who's like the least, he has like the lowest will cap. So, Chemel and Lyric decide that they need to get rid of Sajdu so that the will cap can be greater and Chemel can grow a lot bigger. So, Lyric grabs a hold of Sajdu. Sajdu's like struggling and everything. And Lyric rips Sajdu out of the Abomination's mass, and he just like throws them to the side. So I mean, there's probably are still parts of Sajdou's like body inside the big mass, but like Sajdou's sentience is now removed. Sajdou's core is now removed. So now Chemmel is no longer subject to that former will cap. Chemmel grows to a big size, so he can fight Arch Agriabel. However, you might remember that red matter explosive that Chemmel put like in the mantle of this planet. Boom! The planet like blows up. And like green plasma goes everywhere. And then like the green plasma sort of lights up the battlefield. There's still like plenty of dark spaces where it's hard to see. But the green plasma lights up the battlefield significantly, so Chemmel can sort of like see Arch Agriabel. This right here is actually the planet currently being taken by the core gate. The core gate activated because, like, I mean, yeah, it's time to get out of there. I told you about core gates in the last episode. So this battle goes on for a while with them fighting on like different chunks of the planetoid. So, eventually, at the end, what happens is that, like, a massive mirror gate is formed at, like, the edge of the system. And, like, the big thing is that, I'm trying to think of how to word this. Because I think there was, like, a struggle of wills over where this, massive mirror gate would lead. Because I think it was like Arch Agriabel wanted to send everyone to Buru, but Chemmel wanted to send everyone to the Obsidian Moon, like the big prison that he had in the first book. Eventually, the battle is over and Chemmel wins. This thing leads to the Obsidian Moon prison, and it takes like all of these guys to like the Obsidian Moon prison. And it's actually kind of funny. This is sort of like a joke segment. Is that, like, Chemmel is now stuck inside of his own Obsidian Moon prison because, like, he just sent everyone to the same place. So he's actually stuck inside the filtration system of the Obsidian Moon. Now, I didn't explain this a lot in, like, the first book, but every Archbereshi has these little figures called hosts. These are kind of like personal servants to the Archbereshi, the Star Guardian, if you will. And these are what Achelim's hosts sort of look like up close. I based this design on the Allays from Minecraft. And Achelim's very nice to his hosts. He lets them be like all sorts of different colors and stuff. Chemmel, on the other hand, is very cruel to his hosts. And his hosts are actually called legions. So like Chemmel's personal servants are called legions. And I heard something fall. Whatever, I'll worry about it later. And so like these guys are actually kind of like in a hive mind. And they're in a hive mind because Chemmel, like, bullies them. Chemmel sort of, like, fears them into place as, like, this big hive mind. They were in the first book a little bit, but they sort of play, like, a much bigger role in the second book. And sometimes they'll, like, laugh at Chemmel, but they are still, like, deathly afraid of Chemmel, and they will do everything Chemmel says. They'll laugh at him, but they'll also do what he says because they're afraid of him. So they let Chemmel out of the Obsidian Moon. Chemmel then goes to let Leric out of the Obsidian Moon. And this is important because Leric has the Orb of Prophecy, the Emerald Eye. So they go to the palace on the planet of Magog. That's like this big salt planet. They go to a palace on Magog where there's like this massive laboratory. There's like this massive laboratory inside of the palace. And Leric takes the Orb of Prophecy, puts it in like this machine, and they start using this machine to translate like every prophecy ever. Now it's a very slow process that's going to take like thousands upon like kerbillion, kajillion millenniums. And they're not even going to get all of the prophecies translated by the end of Planetary Lullabye. But this is like a big reason why, in like a lot of 12-sided mirror stories, the Ubhermesh just know a lot of what's going to happen, is because they stole the Orb of Prophecy and tried to translate a lot of what they could from it. And so they don't know they're like that cat from Adventure Time who had an approximate knowledge on many things. They don't know everything that's going to happen. They just have an approximate knowledge on many things. So they start translating it, and what Lyric does is he specifically asks for any prophecy that has to do with the words nothing and shattering. I didn't explain shattering in like the first book, but like essentially shattering and nothing are like synonyms. Like shattering is when like the bind of the mirror will shatter, and nothing is the destruction of everything. So the shattering is just part of trying to bring nothing, right? They're essentially the same thing. Now, Lyric learns two very important things from doing this. I will give you this phrase. The destruction of Theswid Rue will bring nothing. The destruction of Theswid will bring the shadows of nothing. It's a very particular phrase. It's worded in a very interesting way. And so Lyric essentially decides that his main goal will be to shatter the Star of Theswid. Will be to like destroy the Star of Theswid Rue. Specifically the one in the Chamber of Rue, right? Now, that's not the only step to bring nothing. There is another step to bringing nothing, which will happen later on in the story. But the big thing Lyric needs to do to bring nothing is to destroy the Star of Theswid. That's, like, important. That is key. We'll discuss the other thing in a minute when we get around to it. Basically, the other thing is that they need to subdue one mirror part of the Rockweaver, because if one mirror part of the Rockweaver is gone, well, then the Rockweaver won't be allowed to make rocks anymore, because you need mirror parts for every sentient creature in the 12-sided mirror. You need 12 of each thing that is going to exist and live. So if one Rockweaver is gone, you can't make any more planetoids. So because you can't get pieces for like one of its mirror parts. So I mean, there's a little complicated, but there are other missions to subdue the Rockweaver, which they'll do before trying to take Theswid. So that will happen later. For now, I want to discuss the hero side of things. Yeah, I want to discuss the hero side of things. So, what happened at the end of last time was that these two got 2 Souls of Moon. And as for the 3rd Soul of Moon, what they did was they left it with Nalma. They left the 3rd Soul of Moon with Nalma because Nalma had to come to terms with her own mortality, and they decided they would not take the Soul of Moon from Nalma unless she was like ready to give it up, unless she was like ready to accept her own mortality and give the Soul of Moon so that like they could find the last one. And so Nalma is currently living in the Bareshi College with Lady Hatun, if you remember from the first book. Yeah, Lady Hatun. Now, one thing I forgot to mention is that Lady Hatun actually gave Irileth a device Um, and this device is what helps them track the souls of Moon. It doesn't work unless you already have a soul of Moon inside of it. So what happens is you put these inside of the tracker, and then it will like show you where the other ones are throughout the 12-sided mirror. Partway through the series, so like they put the soul of Moon in, and then they see like 11 flickering lights throughout like the map of the 12-sided mirror. However, after like the first book, one of these lights stops blinking. One of these lights is suddenly hard to see. Why is that? Well, you remember that Lyric stole the Emerald Eye from Thela, and now that is currently in the black plasma sort of that's sort of like in the black plasma covering of Odotham, which makes it hard to find. Interesting. So we'll see how that works in a minute. So Irileth, Agribel, and Dagonui are currently chilling out in the system of Theswood Lev. And they're sort of like recounting their all the stuff to Achelim. Achelim agrees to let Nalma live with Lady Hatun instead of giving the Soul of Moon up right away. It's kind of just, be good for her to learn some wisdom about some things. We briefly meet some of the planetary guardians of Theswood Lev. There are actually two Bereshi. This is Daniel, and this is Ezekiel, and they're sort of they sort of took up the role of planetary guardians in the absence of Agribel and Dagonui. They're sort of like planet babysitters, I guess. So you meet those guys. We also meet Cooliel, who's cool, That's one of his mirror parts. There's a more important mirror part of Cooliel coming up, who will play like a bigger role in the story. But for now, we just meet like some of these guys and sort of just start the hero side of things in a very calm state. So eventually, these guys decide to go on their first mission of the book, and their first mission of the book is they go to like this big city, which is currently under control of the Ubhermesh, and it's a very dark city because there's all these spires that lead up from the ground, and these spires like drip with planet blood, sick planet blood. If you remember from the first book, sick planet blood is sin if you touch it. It's that bad. And so like Irileth is very careful not to let Agribel or Dagonui touch any of this purple liquid, and they manage to escape without touching any of it. But the main villain they have to fight in this segment. I'm laughing because of how absurd this character is. So this guy's in this massive bedrock mech that's like in the shape of a hand, right? But the pilot of this mech is not a Bereshi, it's not a Sapien, it's not a Crawler. This guy right here is a Moon. Now, the thing with this mech is that it sort of translates the planetary language into Bereshi language so that, like, the Bereshi can understand this guy. But basically, this is a moon named Baron. And Baron used to be a moon that was, like, circling this planet with like one other moon. So there was like a planet and there were two moons. Baron liked to insult the other moon and give the other moon a hard time and like stuff like that. Baron was just like this rebellious, stubborn moon. And eventually the planet just decided, okay, Baron, you need to go away if you're going to be like that. If you're going to be like that, you need to go away. And so Baron left his old house. Now, interestingly enough, Tavalef noticed this. The Speaking noticed this. Baron is one of the first characters chronologically in the 12-sided mirror that got to see the Speaking of Tavalef. We talked about the Speaking of Tavalef last time. And the Speaking of Tavalef appears to Baron and asks Baron if he wants, like, a home. The Speaking offers to give Baron a home somewhere where, like, he can be safe. Baron rejects. Baron actually rejects this offer. Because Baron actually goes on to take refuge in the Ubhermesh. And the Ubhermesh fit him out with this nice, like, bedrock mech and send him to go conquer worlds and destroy, conquer and eventually destroy worlds, right? And I'll tell you one character who's a big inspiration for how this guy actually speaks. So do you remember that episode of Billy and Mandy? Where there was a massive meteor that, like, came out of the sky and like, it sort of projected itself as, like, this alien. And it told Billy to, like, go get him brains, and, like, it sang this song about it. That's where I got Baron's personality from. And so during this entire chase sequence, Baron's just, like, singing about his backstory and how he's, like, a conqueror for the Ubhermesh army and all sorts of stuff like that. And the main gang just have to, like, run away from him. Eventually, after this chase sequence, this is more supposed to be, like, a silly introduction to, like, the story. Like, I wanted the first two stories from each perspective to be kind of silly, to just kind of get you back into the swing of things a little bit. And eventually, like Baron makes so much of this purple liquid come out that he just, like, drowns the entire city and himself inside of it. And, like, the heroes were, like, on a hill nearby, so, like, they didn't get to touch any of this purple goop, but Baron just drowns himself in the purple liquid, like, and acts like he won. So that was, like, a whole thing. And after this, the heroes get the 4th Soul of Moon from nearby, and then they move on to their next planet. Okay, so Chemel and Lyric are now outside of the Obsidian Moon. And they discuss what they need to do to bring nothing. And they discuss that the first major thing they need to do is they need to subdue the Rock Weaver. I told you guys briefly about the Rock Weaver in, like, the first video. The Rock Weaver is this guy who, like, weaves together rocks and puts them through this big gate called the Nest Gate. Basically, what they need to do is they need to go find this guy and subdue just one of his mirror parts. Now, in order to do that, they need to go through one of the star graveyards. Now, you remember, the star graveyards, they were these big weapons with, like, antimatter galaxies and black holes inside of them. They call black holes star corpses in Planetary Lullabye, because, like, the stars are alive, so these are basically, like, corpses. They decide to go through the Chamber of Lev, right? They decide to go to, like, the Star Graveyard and the Chamber of Lev. And this sequence is very interesting. Because Lyric knows that nothing is going to happen. Lyric knows that nothing is going to happen. So, what he does is he's kind of careless as he goes through the star graveyard. And Lyric decides to have some fun with it as well. He fires matter arrows at like the antimatter stars and planets and stuff, and like blows them up, and like sometimes he'll steer Chemmel really close to a black hole just to mess with him. Lyric's like riding on Chemmel's back this whole time. Actually, I have like a visual. I think this is like the thumbnail of the book. This is like the thumbnail of the book. Is like them proceeding through the antimatter stars and black holes and stuff, as you can see in the background. And Chemmel's just really mad at Lyric for doing all of this. Because there's no reason to do any of this. But Lyric's just having fun. Lyric's just having like a whale of a time. And Chemmel is just so mad at Lyric for doing all of this nonsense. It eventually gets to the point where it eventually gets to the point where like Chemmel just demands to take charge and like grounds Lyric from his matter privileges. And so eventually they get to the nest of the Rockweaver. They get to the nest of the Rockweaver and they have to have a big fight against him. The Rockweaver's this massive Bresci that gives Chemmel a run for his money. So like there's like this big fight scene against this guy. Now, how do they win? Well, you notice that he's already standing on top of a massive mirror gate. Now, the mirror gate doesn't activate until the Rockweaver actually puts like the training rock through. And so what Chemmel does is he focuses his will on this massive obsidian ring. And he manages to get the nest gate to connect with the obsidian prison, the obsidian moon. Now, Chemmel and Lyric themselves aren't enough to take this guy down. So Chemmel calls through the portal and summons his Legionites. And the Legionites come through and they like sort of swarm around the Rockweaver. They couldn't just link to the Rockweaver because they didn't know where he was, and if they got the wrong position, they'd just end up in like a black hole, right? So that's kind of like they had to go take the long way through to here. But now that they are here, they can sort of like link through back to the Obsidian Moon. And when they do, the Legionites come through, they swarm the Rockweaver, and they pull him inside. And so like everyone goes through the portal. Chemmel goes through the portal. Lyric goes through the portal. Everyone goes through the portal. And like the Rockweaver cries as he's finishing his rock. And the Rockweaver becomes the largest trophy of Chemmel. So like most of the other characters are sort of lined up in this massive hall from like their toes to their head. Sometimes they're in a strange position. Or whatever. But the Rockweaver, he's laid horizontally. And he's laid like sort of on a roof of one of these complexes. But it's not like the highest roof. So like there's... So like you can walk out onto a balcony. And from that balcony, you can see like this massive field of obsidian. Where the Rockweaver now resides. He's like laying down on like this massive field. And I don't know how large this field would be, but part of me imagines that like you could see the curvature of the obsidian moon over this massive field. This is one of the big trophies of Chemmel. This is one of Chemmel's big trophies. So after this point, they have left Gravathon in the Obsidian prison for multiple years. And so Chemmel comes around and like, he lets Gravathon out. And after he lets Gravathon out, he discusses one of his next weapons, which he is building. And this is kind of where we get the discussion of the history behind the name Odotham. So, the word Odotham was derived from a Sapien village that took pride in taking carnality by force, is the term used. They don't go into detail about this. They just explain that Chemmel admired these humans. Not for their desires, because Chemmel did not understand such a desire. I mean, Chemmel's like a being of will. Beings of will don't really find pleasure in such frivolities. But he admired their dedication to take what they wanted. So, in honor, Chemmel named his star Odotham. And another thing Chemmel did, this is sort of my story's version of the Nephilim. What Chemmel decided to do is he decided to forcefully mesh Ubhermesh will with sapien flesh, and he sort of like mixed them together in obsidian. This is more like a Frankenstein's monster sort of thing, where like he just like takes pieces of sapien and pieces of Bereshi and like sort of meshes them together. And what he does with this is he creates two things. He creates an army of creatures. I don't know if pretty sure I had a picture of one. Oh yeah, he creates like this army of like obsidian creatures called Nephilites. And they're like these strange contorted abominations in which like the will of like the Ubhermesh overpowers like the sapien will inside of it and becomes like this awful contorted thing. And another thing he makes with like the same process is he makes a massive obsidian dragon. He makes this massive obsidian dragon, which now serves as the guardian of the obsidian moon. And like this dragon's big weapon is he's got like this tongue, and this is like a big solid eyeball. This is like a big rough stone like eyeball that like launches out of the dragon's tongue, like sort of like at the speed of a chameleon, but it will like bash into things, right? It'll sort of like bash into things when it does this. And so this is like setting up a boss fight for like one of the next books. I think it is a boss fight in book 4 actually. And so like the Nephilites become like a big portion of the Ubhermesh army, and then their leader, the Obsidian Dragon, is mostly like a guardian of the Obsidian Moon. Okay, and so like after all that's like the Ubhermesh side of things up until the climax, really. This is one of the shortest books of Planetary Lullabye. It's a pretty short book, and it's just because of how quick the climax comes out of. The climax happens very quickly in this book. And so let's go over to the hero side of things. So I don't think I have a visual of what this planet looks like. But essentially Irileth, Agribel, and Dagonui come out of the Mirror Gate, and they end up in this massive, on like this massive moon of quartz. But like this massive moon of quartz, and it's a really big moon, and there's like stalactites of quartz that like go up really high, like mountain height, on this moon. Well, I mean, I'd say it's even bigger than like mountain height, because like like you can like see these spikes sticking out of the moon from like really far away. It's like this massive quartz moon, and there's a massive battlefield going on this quartz moon. On one side of the battlefield is this big obsidian fortress run by the Ubhermesh, and they're commanded by an Ubhermesh named Baal. And what Baal is like, this is what he looks like. That thing in his hand is like this massive lightning staff, which like he can shoot lightning out of. But like I also kind of have a visual gag where like he kind of uses this staff as like a stick shift for this like cloud-like thing that he's standing on. I don't have the cloud drawn here, but and he kind of like talks like a Minecraft villager as well. Like Minecraft pillager, I guess. He's meant to sound like a Minecraft pillager. So like a lot of the other us can't understand him, and they just like go off of body language. And so that's like one side of the battlefield. On the other side of the battlefield is the Good Bereshi. The Good Bereshi are commanded by 3 commanders, and these commanders are Werathon, this sort of bionicle-looking character. This is one of her mirror parts, actually. Rylu, and Cooliel. So these 3 Bereshi are like the commanders of this army that are sort of trying to storm Baal's fortress and claim the Soul of Moon, which they are trying to keep track over. So what happens in the battle? A lot of the battle takes place like out in the open, out on the field. Eventually, Agribel and Dagonui get into one of the obsidian tanks, and they just like drive ahead into the fortress. They like drive the obsidian tank into the fortress, and Cooliel's with them. Cooliel's like on the back of the tank, sort of like giving them directions and stuff. So like Agribel, Dagonui, and Cooliel are all riding on this massive tank, and they actually get into the fortress. So Baal's perspective, like his priority switches from manning the outside battle to like trying to go in and like follow them. And I remember having a visual for this. I don't think I ever uploaded it, but hang on, I'll pull up these guys while I'm discussing it. The Bereshi get the tank into the fortress, and they get into Baal's like personal palace. And as they're driving the tank forward, they're like tearing up the carpet, tearing up the floorboards, all sorts of stuff like that. They're going up and down like all these staircases in this massive hunk of metal, and like Baal's chasing after them the entire time, and they're like destroying all the furniture and stuff. Eventually, they get to a point where like they're going up, like the tank is going up this massive spiral staircase, like really fast, and like Cooliel's sort of like giving Agribel and Dagonui like the directions to turn the tank in. Eventually, Cooliel says, "Take a sharp right. take a sharp right off of this spiral staircase. And they just do it. They take a sharp right off of the staircase, and the obsidian tank like plummets down and like bursts through the floor of the palace. And I didn't explain this before, but the way Agribel and Irileth sort of take one of the Soul of Moon with them, right? The way they sort of like they sort of have to get Soul of Moon's permission to move him. This is like a big part of the story. And so what they'll do is that Agribel will find like this sort of opening on the side of one of like the Soul of Moon crystals. He'll go inside of that. And when he does, he'll like go inside of the crystal and he'll actually get to talk with Soul of Moon. Now he's in this like very abstract form that doesn't really look like his sun form, because of course we're supposed to build up that reveal. That's one of those things that's revealed later. And so, like, bursting this tank through the floor is actually what gives Agribel this access to the interior of the crystal part of Soul of Moon. And what Soul of Moon does, usually when they get to this point, they've usually won the battle by now, but they're still in the middle of this battle. They're still in, like, the middle of this battle against all these Ubhermesh, who are, like, giving them a hard time and everything. So Soul of Moon actually lends a significant portion of his will to Agribel. And so what happens is that Agribel goes out to like the surface of this quartz moon, which has now been revealed to be the Soul of Moon that they're looking for. Agribel grows to like this massive size. Where it's like, if you remember that scene from Shrek, where Shrek was like on the back of like the massive beer barrel, and he was like moving his legs, and he was just kind of like rolling it under his feet. This is essentially what Agribel can do now. And so, like, this massive moon just falls to like the planet beneath it. And I do have a visual for this, actually. This is not to scale. I'm going to let you guys know that when I show you guys this visual, it is not to scale at all. But, like... And there's, like, a massive gravity on the whole thing, which, like, forces Ball to, like, the ground. And, like, the rest of his army. And Agribel just kind of, like, chases after Ball on this massive quartz moon, which is like ripping up the ground beneath it as it's moving along because it's got all these big spikes on it. And like Bell's just trying to run from this thing. Eventually, the good Breshi catch up with Bal, and they send him to Tuburu. And we're given a bigger explanation of Tuburu, how it's sort of like an ironic fate for the Ubhermesh, because, like, well, I mean, they put people in, like, this massive obsidian moon forever anyway. It's like, you know, it's kind of a fitting punishment for them. Giant ball of quartz not drawn to complete scale. So at this point in the story, the good Breshi now have like 5 Souls of Moon. And actually, they have 6. Why do they have 6? Well, they're joining forces with Werathon. And actually, Werathon's sword actually has a Soul of Moon in the hilt of it. Like, there's like a gemstone in the hilt of Werathon's sword. And this is actually one of the Souls of Moon. It's almost as if someone wanted these two to meet. I should mention also, like, while we're on the discussion of Werathon, this entire time, Werathon had been watching over a sort of Sapien refugee. And Werathon was keeping this Sapien refugee safe from, like, this ensuing battle that was going on. This Sapien refugee is named Delmara, and she's like a young adult Sapien. And Werathon was like keeping her safe by keeping her in like a little chest pocket, um, making sure she had everything she needed and stuff like that. So essentially, if Irilef was kind of like a dad Bereshi to Emerald, Werathon is sort of like a mom Bereshi to Delmara. So yeah, there's that, and you can see that this is a scene that happens later. You can kind of see the two of them together. Okay, so hang on, I got some mucus. I gotta. Okay, I got to take care of that mucus. So Werathon was watching over Delmara the whole time. Okay, so now we're already into the climax of the book. Now we still got 2 planets to visit, but we're already into the climax of the book. So the good Bereshi all end up on like this mushroom planet, and they're kind of able to find the Soul of Moon pretty easy, you know. So now they're up to 7 Souls of Moon. However, this is sort of this is not a necessary part of bringing nothing, but this is a necessary part of keeping something. So the Ubhermesh kind of realize that if the good Bereshi find all of the Soul of Moons, they're gonna find Odotham. They're gonna find Odotham, they're gonna free the captives, and at that point Odotham's just gonna be like completely up for destruction at that point. So, what happens is that the main guys, Chemel, Lyric, and Gravathon, they all decide that they need to find one of the Soul of Moon. They need to find one of them. It's kind of like the Fang Blings from Ninjago. They only need one of them if they're gonna like stop their enemies. And so these guys get in like this bedrock helicopter. It's like a bedrock helicopter, and as it moves, it goes copter, 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 copter. They get in this massive bedrock helicopter, and they go to find one of the Soul of Moon. Now, they go after Irilef directly because they know that Irilef has at least one Soul of Moon by now. So now there's a chase sequence. Everyone's on this massive planet of mushroom. Our 6 heroes, which we have 6 now because Werathon, Kuliel, and Rylu just kind of like joined everyone else. Everyone gets like on the back of Doggo Nui, and Doggo Nui just runs. Doggo Nui just books it. And the bedrock helicopter follows closely behind. Lyric and Chemel are throwing out their antimatter explosives, which they still have and like stockpiled to try and like chase Doggo Nui. Doggo Nui's doing all like these tactical maneuvers and like run around and like there's like this massive battle scene. Some of the good Bereshi are like throwing some of the giant mushrooms at the bedrock helicopter and stuff like that. It's like this massive chaotic battle scene. Eventually, Chemel causes a massive ravine to form. It's like this massive sort of circular shaped ravine. He causes this massive ravine to form in the heat of the battle. And everyone just like sort of falls into it, and this is where the battle continues. Now, some water and some lava, like some water from like a nearby river is like pouring down onto like this lava that's like underneath and is like making this big ring of obsidian at like the floor of the battle. Irilef's leading the team, and he's trying to get them to like avoid Chemel's like attacks. Chemel grows to this massive size at this point because everyone's trapped in the ravine, and he's using like his moon chain to try and like bash the good Bereshi into submission. Um, but like they all keep getting away from him. Gravathon has an idea, which is not a good thing, because every time Gravathon has an idea, it doesn't end good. Gravathon looks at the big star that's like in the sky right now. And she was like, okay, throwing the star away from the system didn't work very well last time. What if I bring the star towards us? So Gravathon takes her sword, she pulls the star towards everyone, and now the planet's about to be engulfed by a giant star. And Lyric just questions why she even did that in the first place, why she thought that was a good move to do. And Chemel's like, okay, we gotta get out of here. Oh, hey, look at the convenient massive ring of obsidian that just formed in the floor. So Chemel focuses his will toward the massive obsidian ring in the floor, and he decides to go to the college of Lady Hatun, if you remember from the first book. And Chemel says, me, Lyric, and Gravathon, we're gonna go to the college of your old master, Lady Hatun. Now, you have the choice to follow us and bring the Souls of Moon with you. It doesn't say all this explicitly, but this is kind of the idea. You have the choice to follow us through, bring the Souls of Moon with you, and you will have to beat us in battle over there. Or you can let us destroy the college of Lady Hatun and, like, take her as a trophy. Take Lady Hatun and, like, force her into the Obsidian Moon prison. That's your choice. So Chemel, Lyric, and Gravathon all go through. Irilef decides that he is going to follow after Chemel, and, like, his whole team is there with him. However, Cooliel stays behind because one Bereshi is needed to activate the core gate of the planet during an apocalypse, during like an apocalyptic event where the planet's going to die. So Cooliel decides to stay behind and go find the core gate and activate it. And now Cooliel's going to be fine, because after you activate a core gate, a mirror gate will open up for you to sort of escape from that place. That's like a whole thing. So our villains and our heroes are now out on like this gas giant planet, and over the gas giant planet is this Cloud City style college run by Lady Hatun, and Lady Hatun is kind of like standing on top of it, holding like 4 moons in her hands, just kind of staring off into space and looking very stoic. And this is sort of where, like, the final battle of the series begins. And this is, like, a very chaotic battle. I'm not going to explain, like, every little piece of detail that, like, happens during this battle. But Chemel's focus is on fighting Irilef and Lady Hatun, because he wants the Souls of Moon from Irilef. Irilef's, like, holding on to the tracker, right? So Chemel's focus is on Irilef and Lady Hatun, who's like the most powerful Bereshi in this fight. Lyric's focus. Now, Lyric actually knows a little bit more than Chemel at this point, because like Lyric's been like studying the prophecies. And so, Lyric actually knows that Nalma went to the college and is like sort of off by herself in like a dorm room. And he knows that Nalma actually has one of these Souls of Moon. So Lyric's like, okay, I'm going to be sneaky about this. I'm not going to tell Chemel about this. Chemel can focus on like Irilef all he wants. I'm going to go after Nalma. And like, as Lyric goes after Nalma, Agribel sort of chases after Lyric, right? And then I had Gravathon paired up with Warathon. I thought that was fitting. Their names sounded similar. I can't remember where Dagonui and Railu were in this fight. I think Dagonui was with Agribel, and I think Railu was with Werathon. So, like, all those things are going on. Agribel's chasing Lyric through, like, the streets of the college. Hatoon and Irilef are fighting Chemmel, like Chemmel's, like, down on, like, the sort of base of the gas giant world. There's, like, the sort of solid base beneath all the gas where Chemmel's stationed. And Werathon and Gravithon are sort of, like, fighting on like the outskirts of the school. Eventually, Gravithon is like, okay, so I see a star again. Gravithon decides this battle isn't going well. I'm gonna fling a star again and see what happens. So Gravithon just, like, throws the star. And she knows that after she does, the college is going to be, like, really cold because it doesn't have any sunlight, it doesn't have any heat. Werathon is like, okay, I have this sword which sets things in orbit around other things. That's the power of Werathon's sword. I don't know if I mentioned that. So Werathon points her sword at the gas giant planet, and then at, like, the big star, so that it will stay in orbit around the star and everyone will be okay. And so, like, the most climactic moment of this battle is that this star is being flung along, this planet's being flown along, everyone's holding on for dear life, even Chemmel. And it's like, the star is moving so fast that you can see the constellations changing and rearranging, because the star's position in the universe is, like, different now. It's, like, going so fast. Eventually, this star meets another star system. It, like, smashes into this other star. And, like, the two stars sort of become one. And there is kind of, like, a shock wave that goes around that star system. All the planets are okay, everyone's okay, everything's still in orbit around everything, and the gas giant is now in orbit around, like, this big, massive unified star, but everything is shifted, like, slightly to a different place. And it's kind of like a big impact sort of thing. So, at the end of this battle, everything's in a new place and everything's kind of calmed down. Chemmel realizes that this is going to alert the attention of the Archbreshi of the star that like the two stars emerged into. So Chemmel's like, okay, it's time to get out of here soon. However, he's not leaving without the Souls of Moon. And here's the thing. Irilef agrees to give the tracker to Chemmel. Just so that, like, the battle can stop and everything can be calmed down. Irilef agrees to give the tracker to Chemmel. Now, here's the thing. The other Bereshi are sort of, like, in protest of this. Hatoon realizes what Irilef is doing. So Hatoon, just, like, she's, like, at a massive size right now. So Hatoon just takes her entire college and, like, throws it to, like, some other part of the universe. So, like, everyone in the school is okay, all the good Bereshi who were also in the school are okay, and they're just gone. So it's just Irilef, Hatoon, and the three bad guys, Chemmel, Lyric, and Gravithon. And they're all kind of, like, on the, like, down at the base of the gas giant. Now, Irilef agreed to give the tracker to Chemmel. But what Irilef had did was he sort of, without Chemmel knowing, he formed, like, a small mirror gate, put all of the Souls of Moon inside of it, and that mirror gate led back to Theswood Lev
That led back to Achelim, so now those Souls of Moon are being watched over by Achelim. Irilef gives the empty tracker to Chemel, and Chemel can't do anything because he needs one Soul of Moon to even get the thing to operate. Chemel breaks the thing in his hand because he has no use for it. And then Chemel gets really pissed. Chemel gets really pissed. And what he does is he takes his staff, he strikes it into the ground of the planet, and the planet just like shatters into like different chunks and stuff. Irilef and Hatun are on different chunks, and Chemel sets his sight on Lady Hatun. He says, if I can't get the Soul of Moon, I'm at least going to make you one of my trophies. Now, Hatun actually has kind of like a really cool line as Chemel's trying to do this. If I can load it up. This is like a line I do want you guys to hear. It's like... Where is it? It's pretty close. Yeah, this is like the sort of... Oh no wait, hang on. I think... Yeah, I think it's this one, right? It's this time. Okay, so it's like around here. What is it you find humorous, ye who must abandon hope? Chemel asked. Listen, Hatun declared. You cheer as though this is a victory of yours, as if Tavalef will smile on you for taking one of his lesser servants. Lesser? Chemel asked as he pushed harder against Hatun's arms. Tavalef does not need me, Hatun explained. I could die tomorrow. I could die today. I could die in a year. I could die at my birth. Tavalef does not need me. But you, Ubhermesh, taking an ancient name of folly as though it were a name tied to success, you need Lyric. You need Gravathon. You need the legions of your dark realm. Tavalef does not need me, but you need they. Chemel finished pushing Hatun through the mirror gate, and he fell through it himself, and Gravathon followed closely behind. So it's like this scene where it's like just Chemel takes Hatun with him. So now, the rest of the good Bereshi are sort of like in the school, and they're a little depressed because, you know, for all they know, Irilef had just handed over the Souls of Moon to the Ubhermesh. But Irilef didn't. Irilef gave the Souls of Moon back to Achelim. And like the team with like Agribel, Daganui, Railu, and Werathon, this is sort of a team of 4 now. They're also with Nalma, and Nalba agrees that it's time to give them the Soul of Moon. And they also have the Soul of Moon inside of Werathon's sword. Werathon's sword, this is when it's revealed that Werathon's sword actually has one of the Souls of Moon in it. So, at this point, I think it's like they're up to 7 by the end of Book 2. They're up to 7. And as for what happens next, well, that's for the next video. Book 2 was one of the easier ones to explain, because Book 1 was I had to establish like a lot of exposition and like how the,
universe itself works and everything like that. Book 3 is going to be really hard to explain because that's when we get into like the complicated time travel shenanigans. I mean, the third book is just dedicated to the incredibly complicated thing I told you about Soul of Moon and Soul of Moon and Luna of Soon. Like, that's what the third book is about, essentially. But book 2 was mostly like plot. Book 2 was mostly plot and like everything that happened with that. It's a somewhat silly book. A lot of silly things happen in this book. It's kind of like Deltarune Chapter 3, where it's like a lot of this book is very silly, but it ends on a very dramatic note that sort of shifts the tone for the series. It's like a big moment. The separation between Irileth and Agribel is like a big moment of the story. And also, they lost the tracker, so, well, how are they going to find the Souls of Moon in the future? Well, maybe someone wants them to find the Soul Moon. Maybe a few people want them to find the Soul Moon, right? Maybe a few different beings want them to find. You know, maybe someone wants them to find them. And that's kind of where we end the second book. Also, I might as well explain. There's like a running gag through the second book where it's like every time Chemmel goes through one of his mirror gates back to Odotham, it leads him through the filtration system of the Obsidian Moon. Because, like, after he takes his captives, he usually just goes back to Odotham through that because it's like the easiest thing to do, and oftentimes there's like a heat of the moment type thing where it's like he's in danger and stuff and he has to go through really quick. So there's like a running gag where Chemmel keeps ending up in like the filter of the Obsidian prison, and like the Legionites have to come around and help him out. And we kind of do end the second book on another one of those jokes. The writings of the Record Keeper since the day her master told her of these things were split into 3 sections. This is the end of the second section. Set the sanctuaries to move and set the core gates to turn. Allow the star to begin its movement through the grave gate. Rest your instruments and have the Archbereshi speak words pertaining to the life of the star. Oh yeah, it's called the Grave Gate. It's not called the Death Gate. It's called the Grave Gate. And so that's kind of, yeah. Okay, so that's book 2. It's kind of surreal because this took so less time than like the first one. I mean, it makes sense. It's a shorter book, and also there's a lot less complicated exposition I have to explain. But yeah, that's book 2. All right, bye-bye, everyone.